We're covering an entire full week split of our rugby strength and power program, where we're holding nothing back from all the exercises, sets, reps, intensities, and methods that we're using. So if you're a rugby athlete who's trying to prepare themselves for a season and build strength, power, and speed so you can dominate on the pitch, stay tuned. What's up? I'm Nick Lyman. I'm a certified strength and conditioning coach, owner of the Rugby Performance Program, but let's dive right into it. So you can see we have a couple of days up initially, and then I'll put the rest of the days up and we'll dive into it, okay? So over here on the left is more of the methods and overarching design that we're gonna be using, okay? So this would be the fifth stage or fifth phase of progression in our Rugby Performance Program, which is a year-long training program to get you ready for season and in season. So a couple of things. So you have some context around what's going on, okay? So first we did a GPP phase, which is a general physical preparedness, and you can see that video on my channel as well, full breakdown as well. Then we moved into a hypertrophy and strength focused training plan where we accumulated more volume, built up some work capacity, and progressed our plyometrics a little bit. And we worked more on the technical side of some of the lifts of what we're doing, okay? And we progressed those up. Then we moved into our strength and hypertrophy focused plan, where we used a method that I used back in high school or college actually, where instead of doing your 4 sets of 10 or 3 sets of 12 to 15, where you get that 35 to 40-ish range of volume, what we did is we doubled the amount of sets essentially and dropped the volume down, so we still get the same workload overall, but we're working more on a strength stimulus. And then we finished with some hypertrophy. And then right before this too, there was a pure strength building phase where we used some other methods, such as like cluster sets and things like that. And I have videos on my channel if you want to go check those out and learn what those methods are. And then I'll also drop my free guide down below where we cover all the different methods that we use throughout our training programs to give you in-depth examples and understanding of how to do that. And you can check that in the links below. Okay, so now we're at our strength and power phase. Okay, so we're starting to transition from building a ton of strength, work capacity, introducing plyometrics, and now we're really starting to shift into more of our strength power. And a great way to be able to do that is to utilize a concept called contrast training. There's a couple of different variations of contrast training, but in general, so you can understand what's going on, it's simply a heavy loaded movement, compound-based movement, where you're required to generate a ton of force, develop strength, and then you pair it with a similar plyometric or power-based movement to achieve something called post-activation potentiation, which simply means that you get a greater performance on your power, plyometric, or sprint-based work, whatever it is that you've chosen to pair it with. Typically, you want to pair your movements with similar force vectors, so vertical, horizontal, or lateral side to side, and similarly with if it's a bilateral or unilateral type movement. And you can guide a little bit deeper into that, but for the sake of this video, that is what we're doing. Okay, so we get the heavy strength stimulus, and then we also work the high speed, high velocity work, power-based work to develop some explosiveness. So we're gonna be doing some contrast training, right? These are our strength and conditioning principles, methods that we're gonna be following. We're also gonna use a little bit of dynamic effort. So dynamic effort is where we are not just going for strength all the time. Now we're trying to work a little bit of bar speed. Now we're trying to move the weight faster. We're trying to really focus on the acceleration and rate of force development that we're achieving with our movements, and I'll cover that a little bit. So typically dynamic effort is when you're lightening the load down to maybe 50, 60%, but you're adding bands, chains, and you're accelerating through the movement. And I'll share those days with you after we go through it. Progressing to some multi-directional plyometrics, and then we're gonna use something called overcoming isometrics. So one of the key areas that I've found for rugby players where they lack is the ability to transfer force through the ground. They're very big, they're very strong, they have very strong legs, can push really hard. This is especially for the forward pack as well, and you'll also see benefits for people trying to increase their speed as well. Overcoming isometrics allow you to really strengthen the ankle and foot complex, develop the tendons, develop tendon stiffness, so that you can utilize the power and strength and force that you can generate from your legs and effectively transfer into the ground without losing any of that dissipating energy, because you can't effectively transfer it into the ground when you push into the ground. So it's a great way to do that. For our SAQ, or speed, agility, quickness, the emphasis is on top speed and acceleration. And for our conditioning, we're working on anaerobic repeat power, which I'll cover when we dive into the actual training. So last thing. So I gotta say, this training is not for beginners. This training is for more advanced athletes and rugby players who have a solid foundation of training and have the off season to be able to implement this training. Okay, this is gonna be tough, it's gonna be challenging, but you're gonna get really great results from it, okay? So we're starting off our week with top speed training, okay? Top speed training and speed training when you're fresh, because you need to have a fresh central nervous system, fresh muscles, fresh body, so you can produce the most amount of force and the fastest amount of speed with what we're trying to achieve. If you're fatigued, broken down a little bit, tired, you're not gonna be hitting a high enough threshold, which with top speed training, you need to be about 95% or higher in order to get a change or get an adaptation. So that's why we're doing it when we're fresh, so we can maximize the potential of gaining speed on our top speed training day. Now let's dive into the actual top speed training session. So for this block, we're gonna be utilizing some agility ladders. Now there's people say they suck, they're really good. We're only using it to develop some ankle strength and to develop use them for some extensive plyometrics to, again, help develop the strength and almost as a CNS primer before we go into the actual training session. So we're gonna do some agility ladder, ankle plyos. There's gonna be hops, single leg hops, side to side lateral hops, and maybe one or two quick type of movements where we're trying to ramp up the CNS system. Then we're gonna get into our dynamic warm-up. You can do your dynamic warm-up first, then the agility ladders. It doesn't matter, they both kind of serve the same purpose. Then we're moving into our dribble series. The dribble series is a great way to help teach athletes the responsiveness that's required when their foot hits the ground, okay? So it helps teach not only positioning, but to start to feel that elastic nature of your foot contacting the ground and the energy that's returned from it. So it's really to help you learn that sort of stimulus so you can take it into your top speed training, and it also helps with your cycling as well, with your front versus back cycle in your sprint. So this dribble series is more like top speed based work and technique based work. And then you see we have A, C, K bleeds, right? So that's the dribbles, right? So ankle dribbles, knee dribbles, then calf dribbles a little bit higher, and then a bleed series. So you simply go from an ankle into a calf, into a knee, into a full sprint to develop that and help with the transition from the technical work into your actual speed work. Then we're gonna get into a little bit more tech work, again, to help with the cycling and foot positioning. So we'll do some wicket stride controls, then we'll go into full wickets, and then we'll finish with a wicket into a full sprint, again, to help with that transition and holding that technique and learning that technique as much as we can. For all of these, you're probably doing 2 to 3 sets, okay? Not a ton of work here. Now, here's the majority of the training session. So this is the top speed. This is the stuff that we're trying to actually get the response out of, okay? We're gonna do some fly 30s. So that's a gradual buildup. And with a fly 30, I typically take a little bit longer buildup, maybe 20, 25 yards, where it's a slow roll into the first marker, and then it's a top speed sprint for 30 yards. I highly recommend that you film and time your speeds, and then you can pull your times and put them in a nice online calculator with physics and get your actual top speed or average top speed across the entire duration or average velocity. It's what I use to help track, since I don't have, say, like a GPS system. It's not perfect, but it does give some good information for you. So fly 30s. You're probably resting 3, 4, 5 minutes. I would say probably closer to 4 or 5 minutes with this. So with the fly 30s, again, not a lot of volume, probably 3, 4 reps. Again, going back to that 95% threshold that you have to hit, right? So if you run your first fly 30, and I'm just gonna throw out arbitrary numbers, say it's 2.5 seconds. You run your next one after rest, it's 2.4 seconds. Great, you've improved. Say you run your next one, it's 2.42. You're still within that 5% to 10% error margin of your best time so far, so good. That's gonna give you some speed development. Say on your next one, you run a 2.6, you're done, right? Because now you're slower, you're over that 10% margin of error. So now you're going to be a little bit slower, or now you're not going to have hit that threshold that we needed to develop speed. Okay, so you really got to rest, give it your full effort, and when you see your top speed drop or your times increase significantly, either rest longer or move on to the next thing. Okay, because you're no longer going to hit top speed, and you're no longer going to get that adaptation we're looking for. The next thing we're getting into is, they're called in and outs. So essentially you're going to be setting up some cones at about 20 yards, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 100, and you can adjust the distance for each one a little bit, maybe 15 yards. And your goal is essentially hit like a flow state, okay? So you're going to start with an acceleration, and then that first 10 yards where the cones are, so from 20 to 30, you're running at top speed, right? You're running as hard as you can. When you hit that next cone, this is where the deceleration or flow kind of happens, right? So this is where you're trying to work on being fluid, you're trying to work on good mechanics, and you're just coasting through without hitting the brakes on your sprint. When you see that next cone, then it's immediately back into full speed sprint, right? And then you go back into flow, back into speed, and this will help teach you how to run a little bit faster, and I'll teach you a little bit and help you with some transition speed as well in the games. Okay, and then this is optional. This is our kind of anaerobic repeat power. Okay, so with our energy systems and conditioning, right, we have 3 different energy systems. So we have creatine phosphate or ATP PC. We have your anaerobic, basically glycolytic system, and then we have our beta oxidation, which is like your aerobic capacity. Think of like cardio, right? So for most athletes, we're spending a majority of our time in the anaerobic, which would be the first 2 energy systems. So that just means without oxygen, and the last one is with oxygen for all my science people, okay? In sports, we're spending a lot of time in the anaerobic system, okay? Because we're putting out high levels of effort, intensity, sprinting, right? And then we're recovering quickly and then asked to do it again without a significant drop off. And if you can do that, you're gonna make a lot more plays, okay? And that's what we're trying to do. So this is a 50-150, really simple. All you're gonna be doing, it is a sprint, a 50-yard sprint. And you say the 50-yard sprint takes you 10 seconds, which it won't, it'll probably take you maybe like 5, okay? Say it takes you 10 seconds. The remainder of the 150 is a jog, and you keep it as slow as you need to in order to maintain your time that you got the first time, right? So in this case, it would be 10 seconds, right? So it's a self-pacing sprint jog interval that you're doing to help you build up some of that capacity to be able to turn it on, continue to work, and then turn it on again without dropping off. And your goal over time is to, 1, obviously sprint faster in the 50 yards, and as well sprint or jog a little faster and reduce the amount of time that it takes you in order to maintain that top speed during the 50-yard sprint. So that is the top speed training session. Now we're going to get into our upper body contrast training for upper body power and strength. So we have our warm-up, right? Simple warm-up. I think a lot of people spend way too much time on their warm-ups. Just get the body moving, get the range of motions that you need. Now, it's not to say if you need a longer warm-up, don't do it. And just you could probably get it done a lot quicker. So we're going to do a TRX Lou raise. This is great for just opening up the chest, getting some overhead mobility, thoracic extension. Great movement. YTWs and press. Get the shoulder blades going. Get the rear delts going. That are going to help stabilize when we get into our heavy pressing work. And then some full range of motion push-ups on an elevated surface is preferable, and you kind of have to do them this way so you can get in that deep range of motion, big stretch, and then push and come back on. After we get through, our 2 sets of our warm-up, then we're getting into our push contrast set. So this is that heavy movement into explosive or power-based movement. Bench press. One of the best movements that you can do because you can load it very heavy compared to other pressing based movements, maybe with like dumbbells, or like some people will try to say it's strength to do like shake bar stuff, I don't know, right? But our goal is all about maximal force production right now, maximal strength output. So bench press 3 sets of 5. Typically we'll start around 80 to 85%, and then as the weeks go on, we'll drop the reps down, increase the sets, and increase the percentage. So Immediately after you get done, you can take about 30 seconds with this. You're gonna go into that high velocity power-based movement. In our case, it's gonna be a one-step chest pass, okay? So it's one step, right? Driving through the legs, transferring through the hip, core, and then out the chest, exploding as hard as you possibly can to get as much power development as possible. Then we take that same concept and we go into our pull contrast. So we're gonna be using pendulate row. So pendulate row is just a row from the ground where there's no movement or momentum that's happening. So it's really gonna target the muscles of the back and not use any of like the stretch shortening cycle or momentum. So you're really gonna get a lot of development for your back with this. Same principles, 3 sets of 5, 80 to 85%. Adjust the sets and the reps and the load as the weeks go on. And then we're gonna take it either into a sled row or an inverted out, in and out plyo inverted row. I really like the sled row because you get to follow through the entire movement. There's no stopping, so you can exhibit and put out as much force as you possibly can. With these, I try to keep our athletes with about a 3 to 4 yard pull for each of their pulls. So if you pull it and it goes 6 yards or something like that, then it's time to add some weight, right? So really great contrast set for both the strength side of things and more of the power-based side. Okay, so we got horizontal press, horizontal pull. Now we need some vertical work, right? Now we need up and down. So we're gonna use a little bit of unilateral work here for some strength and some extra shoulder stability with some single arm kettlebell overhead press. So SAKBOH press, single arm kettlebell overhead press. Typically you're doing 3-4 sets, 6 to 8 reps, get heavy, hard as you can, okay? And then to develop a little bit of grip strength, you don't know how many times in a rugby game, chasing someone down, and the only thing that saves me is grabbing onto a jersey or grabbing onto some shorts or grabbing onto a leg and holding on for dear life to save a tackle or to get a tackle and potentially save a try. So grip strength is super important for rugby athletes. So we're gonna target that with some towel pull-ups, okay? These are very challenging. If you don't have a towel, you can, and your gym has some battle ropes that are a little bit thicker, you can do battle rope pull-ups. If you don't have that, you can use fat grips, anything that's, or what we used to use in college was tennis balls. We used to put tennis balls on the top of our hand and do a pull-up like this. Anything to challenge the grip strength as you're doing a vertical pulling movement will help. And the last thing is our core work. So for our core work here, we're really trying to work some core stability and dynamic trunk control. So we're gonna use a lot of different carries in overhead movements. So our banded overhead march is, yes, it's core work, but it's also to help replicate how your core and body alignment should be during your drive phase mechanics of a sprint. Okay, so that's why we have the marches in here. Same thing for our front rack marches. The marches are gonna add a little bit of extra instability where your hips are going to have to work to stabilize the body along with your core, okay? And then the last thing is a pal-off overhead press and raise to work a little bit of anti-rotation and anti-lateral flexion in one, so you can go into contact and not get blown out of the way, right? You have some core strength in order to absorb those impacts and stay in good position. Next, we're moving on to our lower body contrast training. So, very simple warm up, jump rope for 5 minutes. And the reason this is in here is to get a lot more volume of extensive plyometrics to strengthen, again, the ankles and elastic strength of the ankles to help with some force transfer. So everything we're doing is that in some way, shape, or form is to help it transfer on the field where you need to be fast, powerful, explosive, make cuts, make tackles. Then we get into our hip flow. I have the whole hip flow video on my YouTube channel. It's about 8 to 10 minutes or 15 minutes because it's a follow along, but you can make it, and once you learn it, you can get it done in like 5 to 7 minutes. It's really great. So after our warm, we're gonna go into our plyo. So we're gonna start to add in, again, a little bit more multi-directional plyometrics. And a really great one is a half kneeling lateral jump to a box jump, okay? So we're gonna work that half kneeling position, explode out laterally, which is gonna help you with your cuts and changing direction and developing the power to make that happen, and then transitioning it immediately into a vertical jump. To continue on with the single leg strength and single leg power, which is going to be really associated with your acceleration capabilities, is a single leg rocker jump. So with this, you want the box about just below hip height. You can adjust the box volume as needed. The lower the box is, the greater the range of motion is going to be, the harder it's going to be on you. But if you're just starting out, you can start a little bit higher, and you don't have to jump super, super high in the beginning. You can choose a little bit lower box and then work your way up. With these, you want to focus on pushing into the ground as hard as you can to get up as high as you can, not necessarily just ripping your knee up as fast as you can. Again, it's about putting force into the ground and transferring force into the ground, not how quickly I can raise my knee up, okay? Then we get into our contrast lower body work. So continuing on with the single leg development, we have a rear foot elevated squat. So the one I'm using is a Hatfield rear elevated squat. It adds a little bit more stability to the actual exercise. You can increase the weight and increase the force output. If you don't have a safety bar available, you can do barbell reverse lunge, or you can do some just heavy Bulgarians, and that will get you a similar stimulus for you. And we're pairing that with a single leg tuck jump. Okay, so single leg tuck jump. With these, I want full knee bend, again, pushing into the ground, getting as high as you possibly can. If you don't drop down, you're gonna work a little bit faster ground contact time, which would be something I would probably implement more in like a power speed based training program. But for right now, we want lower body strength and power. After we get done with that, we're moving into our posterior chain development. And again, we're gonna be working some unilateral development. Unilateral movements are going to challenge your stability and going to develop your stability in the hip, knees, and ankle while developing some strength. The caveat to this is the more unstable a movement, the less load you and strength you're going to be able to build. But if we can increase that stability up and you're able to go heavier loads with this, your stability is going to be huge. Your strength development is going to be huge as well. Okay, so we're doing a single leg barbell RDL, about 3 sets of 6. And then we're gonna pair that with either a single leg slider hamstring curl. So we have our hip dominant hamstring, and then we're moving into our knee dominant to target the hamstring in both areas. Or a single leg TRX shelf. These are probably the hardest hamstring exercise that nobody does. Give it a try. Now we got our hips, hams, or we got our posterior chain. Now we're gonna go into our hips and our groin. So a great one to open you up and really focus on strengthening that groin. Your groin is also responsible for lifting your leg up. So if you think you have, very weak hip flexors, you could need to strengthen your groin a little bit, and this will help reduce some of the risk of injuries that typically happen in the groin. So if you're susceptible to groin injuries, you really should add these in so you can start strengthening your groin in a lengthened position. And then a hip flexor raise. So any variation, the one I'm showing is pretty challenging. It's really good because you're in the actual lengthened position. It does take a little bit of a setup, but you can do some mini band hip marches, or you can throw a kettlebell on your foot and get on an elevated surface and raise your leg up as well. And then we're getting into our overcoming isometric. So like what I said before about developing a lot of ankle stiffness to help transfer into the ground, we're doing a bent knee dorsiflex overcoming isometric, and this is to really help develop not only your soleus, but again, the Achilles tendon, to be able to handle a lot of force and to transfer a lot of force development. So this is really gonna help with that force transfer in your acceleration and top speed sprints. And then the next day, chill, rest, mobility, take some time off, don't do much, okay? Because we're gonna get into a whole nother set of training, which I'm about to put up right now. So now we're getting into our next 3 days of training, and you guessed it, we have another speed training session. In order to develop your speed, you're going to need to train speed more than one time a week. You need multiple exposures throughout the week, which is why you're probably gonna see some things in the later workouts while we're, again, developing speed. Okay, so same warm up as before, but now we're gonna start to focus a little bit more on the characteristics and qualities that are needed to accelerate really quickly, which is why we're moving into some plyos and bound based work to develop some of that lower body power. So we're starting with a broad and skier bound or repeat jump. So you're gonna explode out horizontally as far as you possibly can. And when you land, you're immediately going to transition laterally before having to transition back to another horizontal movement. And you're gonna repeat that for the given distance that you are going. Typically it's around 15, 20 yards. So really great multi-directional, quick, rapid power output. Then again, Acceleration is the key here. We're going to be focusing on some single leg work to produce force into the ground. So we're doing a single leg bound into a broad. So you can take the amount of single leg bounds up from 1 to 2 to 3 as you get better and better and better, but you're going to jump out and essentially do a single leg broad jump as far as you possibly can, land, absorb, and then jump out again with 2 and land on 2. If you decide to go up with the number of bounds, you're going to go a single leg bound into a single leg bound into a broad landing, or broad jump and broad landing. Then we're going to get straight into some single leg bounds. Okay, so now we're trying to just produce force vertically or horizontally. It depends on which option you want to go. So more vertical nature with the single leg bound is going to help a little bit more through top speed. If you're going for more distance, that's going to help translate over into a little bit more of your acceleration. So depending on what you need to work on more, you can change those directions of the forces that you're working with. Okay. Now we're going to move into acceleration. So all of this acceleration that I have programmed in here is with a sled, but if you have a thick resistance band like this, you can easily do this with a partner. If you don't have a partner or someone to do this with you, go find a hill or some stadiums and replicate the movements that you're seeing, okay? So a sled overhead march. This is gonna be pretty light. It's just like the banded overhead march, but now we're gonna be in a slight lean forward in good posture, again, to be able to turn the core on, have a neutral pelvis while marching, so we can start to learn the correct mechanics when we're in our sprint technique. Then we're gonna go into some light sled bounds. The reason I really like sled bounds is that it is an exaggerated movement where you're trying to spend a little bit more time on the ground but cover as much distance as possible. This is gonna help teach the athlete how hard they actually need to push into the ground to gain distance when they are going into their normal speed or sprint-based work when they're accelerating out. After we get through that, so about 2 sets overhead marches, about 3 sets with the bounds, maybe you're looking at 10 to 30% body weight here. Then we're gonna move into our sled sprints. So with our sled sprints, we want a short duration, about 10, 15 yards tops, okay? We're gonna keep adding weight onto this sled until we get to something called a 50% velocity decrement. So power is force times velocity, right? So we're trying to maximize both the force side with the weight and the velocity side with how fast we're going, which happens right around 40 to 60% of a velocity decrement. So I like to split it right in the middle with a 50% velocity decrement. So if we're running 10 yards with the sled at a 50% velocity decrement, what this means is that before you do the sled sprint, you're gonna go run a 10-yard sprint as fast as you can. Say it's a 1.5 seconds in 10 yards. Awesome. You're going to keep adding weight, adding weight, adding weight until it takes you 2 times as long to run that sprint with the sled. So in this case, you'd be adding weight until you got to 3 seconds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're running with a heavy load on your back or behind you, 3 seconds is a long time, but it's really gonna reinforce good drive phase mechanics, positioning, attacking underneath the hip and behind the hip, as well as producing power out horizontally to improve your acceleration. Okay, so for this, about 4 to 5 sets. Then you take a nice long break before we get into a little bit of like micro-dosing top speed. So we're gonna do 5 sets of fly 10s where it's a 15-yard buildup. You run maximal speed for 10 yards or 10 meters, and then you're done, right? And then you rest for 3, 4, 5 minutes. Do it again, just like the last speed session. As soon as you see that speed's decrease, then you cut it, okay? For me, I feel better and faster after doing some sleds acceleration-based work before I go into top speed. If you notice that your top speed diminishes after doing this because your legs are tired or maybe you're not used to this, move the top speed first, okay? That way you hit that 95%, you get that top speed development, then you can go into acceleration work, which is a little more lenient on, you know, how fast you need to be running with it. We're gonna get into our conditioning, and this is gonna be a little bit different. I have a video on the top conditioning drills on my YouTube channel where it shows this broken down. We are going to try to get game ready. And what happens in game, there's a lot of running, a lot of cutting back and forth over time, rest real quickly, do it again, right? And there's nothing that's gonna smoke your lungs and your legs quite like doing an agility drill with minimal rest, okay? So you can choose any 4-cone drill. You know, it could be a sprint to a shuffle, to a back pedal, to a sprint, or a sprint, turn and run, shuffle diagonally, turn and run again. It doesn't matter, you can make whatever you want up as long as there's about 4 cuts that are happening in 4 different transitions from how you're moving laterally to forward and back, and the transitions that you put in there. But instead of doing a normal cone drill where typically they're like 5 yards, 5 meters apart, you're going to double the length to about 10 yards or 10 meters, and you're going to run 1 round through one way, immediately stop, go back the opposite way, and then you have about a 45-second break before we're asking you to do it again, do it again, do it again for a total of 10 rounds. This way you're getting the agility training that you need, but you're also developing your conditioning that is going to be more like a game setting than just running like on a treadmill or doing the Stairmaster or something like that. So now we're going to get into our dynamic lower body day, where we're going to have the same warm-up, but then we're going to get into a more of a post-activation overcoming isometric type of contrast training, where the overcoming isometric is meant to prime and stimulate and produce maximal force without breaking the body down and like tearing any muscle fibers or anything like that. And it's going to give us some really good joint specific strength. So we're going to go with a quarter to a half squat, overcoming isometrics. You're going to hold this for 7 to 10 seconds. You're trying to bend that bar in half, and then you're going to take it into some repeat hurdle hops, which are going to be the similar movement and depth that you're going to achieve on the hurdle jumps. So now you're going to try to produce that same force you put into the bar, but jumping as high as you can over and over and over and over again. Okay. Then we're going into our main kind of power work, which a lot of this is power-based work in some way, shape, or form across the force velocity spectrum, okay? But now we're gonna move into our heavy loaded power-based work, and we're getting into some power cleans, or hang power cleans work great. 4 to 5 sets, 2 to 3 reps, 75 up to 85, maybe 90%, depending on your current level with that, but we're really trying to get after with the power cleans for some lower body and full body development. Next, we're gonna get into our dynamic effort based work, okay? So there's not a ton of heavy, strength training stuff. It's really more about moving quickly and being powerful with today, okay? So with our dynamic effort, 3 to 4 sets, 3 to 5 reps, we're gonna be at about 50 to 60% of what your 1 rep max would be, but we're gonna have the bands or chains on to provide something called accommodating resistance, meaning that as you get into better leverage points and you're in stronger positions, you're getting more and more tension. And your goal during this is you continue to try to accelerate through the entire movement. So banded back or banded box squat works really great for this. And then we're gonna move into the complete other side of the force velocity spectrum, which is going to be some of that overspeed based work. So now we're going like peak power into overspeed. So you're getting a nice gap with those. So band assisted vertical jumps, again, same about 3 to 4 sets, 3 to 5 reps, trying to jump through the moon, trying to teach your central nervous system to fire and contract even faster than it normally can to help solidify that into your central nervous system. Then we're gonna go into banded RDLs. For these, again, 50, 60%. When you're starting these, please start with controlling the eccentric and controlling the movement up. As you get better, then you can control the eccentric and then explode up through the concentric. And then you can move into something called fast eccentrics, where you are essentially like dropping down, stopping, and immediately redirecting the force back up, which is great for working in what's called the amortization phase. So there's the concentric, isometric, eccentric action. So concentric, think of the pressing, the muscles contracting. Eccentric would be the lowering, and then isometric would be stopping. The amortization phase is when you go from the eccentric to that brief moment before you explode and come back out. So this is where you work that stretch, shortened cycle as well in the amortization phase, and that is what we're trying to do. So banded RDL into banded broad jumps. Again, 3 to 5 sets, 3 to 5 reps, get after it. And then we got sleds, okay? So this is where it can be a little bit independent for each person. If you struggle getting out maybe the first 5, 10 yards, I would opt for a little bit of a heavier sled push or sled drag kind of with it behind you. If you are someone who struggles a little bit more transitioning, then I would go a little bit lighter and really work on moving a lot faster down the turf. So with these, typically 20 yards is a good marker and a good distance to be able to work those. And anywhere from 5 to 6, maybe 7 sets total, and then you're done. So it seems like a lot, but it's gonna move pretty quickly. And then the last day is your upper body dynamic day. So we'll get same warm up as the last upper body day, same principles with the contrast training. So overcoming isometric with the push-pull isometric, getting some core strength working there, working the back, and really working the chest and triceps on the opposing side. And then we're gonna take that into a rotational throw where you're mimicking that same movement. So you're priming it, right, with the overcoming isometric, and then you're unleashing it with the actual medicine ball throw. Then we'll get into our power-based work. So push press, great movement. You can do split jerks as well, 3 to 4 sets, 3 to 4 reps, maybe up to 5. Again, working at around 80-ish, a little bit higher than 80, maybe 85, 87, 90 as you drop the reps down for the push press. And then power row. So power row, I want the momentum. I want that drive from the legs because that's going to help increase some of the bar speed, which is what we're looking. So heavy load, faster velocities with the power row. It's a great movement. And then we'll do our dynamic effort for the day, which is going to be the banded bench press, 50, 60%. Again, trying to explode up, be as fast as you possibly can, produce a lot of power. Now, there's some extra work here. Normally, I would say like you could be done right after that. You've covered everything you needed to cover. But if you're someone like me who likes to get every aspect of the workout and you have the time to allow it, then I would say you can continue on with this training, which accessory is going to be some chin up or neutral grip pull-ups, weighted preferably, 3 sets, 8 to 12 reps or 8 to 10 reps. Then some core based work with either V-ups, GHD sit-ups, or honestly anything, any core exercise of your choice with the TRX row and reach. So the TRX row and reach is kind of core, depending on how you think of core. I think of core as everything from the hips up through the thoracic spine. So we're getting a little bit of hip drive, we're getting some rotation, and we're actually working a little bit of like scapula health as well with the TRX row and reach for 3 sets of 8. And then I think way more rugby athletes need to strengthen their neck. One of the best ways to do that is just with some simple isometrics, prone and supine neck isometrics, typically 30, 45 seconds. They suck, but you would develop so much neck strength. So that is a full week split of our rugby strength and power program. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Comment any of your questions down below. I'll be going in and I'll be answering all those. Make sure to like, subscribe, hit that little bell notification so you can get future videos where I break down other workouts and other insights to athletic training development. And if you're someone, maybe a rugby player, who wants some help and to know, hey, this program looks great, but how do I make sure that it's progressing the right way? How am I adjusting sets, reps, exercise selection as we transition from week 4 into 5, 6, 7, 8? Then make sure to check out the Peak Performance Program down below where all of our rugby performance programs are housed. And I'll see you guys in the next video.